Hello, my curious cat, and welcome back to another episode of the Say Psychology podcast, the podcast for all the info on psychology's most questionable history. I'm your host, Leslie Lopez, PhD student and psychology nerd. If you're still here, I just want to say thank you so much from the bottom of my heart because I don't think I've ever gone this long without uploading an episode. Not even when I was traveling through Central America. I mean, I was able to pull myself together and be like, hey, let me get an episode or two in, even without microphone. But, there's really only so much I can say on that. Life's just been pretty crazy these last couple of months, both good and bad, don't get me wrong. I mean, just 2 weeks ago, I was in Arizona for a week to attend my first residency, which was so fun, but also so informative. I learned so much, got some amazing feedback on my dissertation thus far. I also defended my proposal, which was super excited. It got accepted. And not to mention, I got to meet some of the most amazing scholars I've ever met. Friendships that I know that I will cherish for days to come. Also, I got a free t-shirt. Then, like about a month ago, one of the most important days of my life occurred, you guys. If I ever do get married, I don't even think that day is gonna top what happened to me. Okay, I got the cutest puppy. He makes me want to cry every day and is also my will to live, let's be honest, quite literally. His name is Frappe, like a frappuccino, the most perfect Parson Russell Terrier that's ever existed, and I'm not exaggerating. My family and I adopted him from the San Antonio Animal Shelter, and there's no words to describe the feeling. Every day I wake up and see his smiling face, and then my whole day is off to a great start. Then I spend the rest of my day at work thinking about him and his stupid, handsome little face. Also, I got promoted at work and life is okay. Not great, but okay, right? You ever have those kind of plateau moments in life where everything is just okay? Like, some things are good, some things are bleh, some things are not so great. Nothing extreme on either end of the spectrum. Well, let's get back into learning about the history of psychology, shall we? Got my Celsius. It's a spot every single time. I got my Celsius ready to rock and roll. And what better way than when one of the weirdest, albeit interesting cases / doctors I've ever had the pleasure of researching. Today, we're learning about Dr. Robert E. Cornish, the doctor who attempted to revive the dead. Whether he succeeded or not, well, stick around and find out. So if you're a little bit insane in the membrane like me, get cozy tozy and let's jump into it. Trigger warning, okay, because this episode does include the discussion of animal testing and animal abuse, so if you're super sensitive about that, I suggest maybe skipping this week's episode. Alright, Robert E. Cornish, born December 21st, 1903, a Capricorn. I love me a Capricorn, man. Well, not all of them, as we'll clearly see here. From the very start, Robert was an extremely smart cookie. Okay, most people go off to college at 18. Not Robert. Robert was done with college by the time he was 18. And not just any college. He graduated from UC Berkeley with honors at 18 and earned his PhD in biology by 22. What was I doing at 22? Actually, I think I started my bachelor's at 22. Not to mention a lot of other college activities that shall not be named in case anyone of high importance, including my mom, is watching. Robert wasn't just a smart cookie, he was also a curious cat like many of us. From the very young age of his career, he pioneered many unique projects, pushing the boundaries of an innovative spirit and what we would consider conventional science. Honestly, I don't blame him, considering he was so young. He was probably kind of bored, honestly. Like, he was in college and couldn't even drink till practically the day of his PhD graduation. Also, he was a minor through all of this, all of his undergrad, so he couldn't date. I would hope not. What else is a genius to do but wonder of the unknown, right? Not that I would know. One of his better known early projects included inventing special lenses that allowed people to read newspapers underwater. Call me slow, but I couldn't figure out if the paper was underwater or he was underwater or both were underwater. Do you know what I mean? So if any of you lovely people know the answer to this question, let me know down in the comments. Although Robert was well known for his great achievements, he still felt like there was something missing. Okay, listen, not to get too deep, because I don't want to say I get it, because I don't think I do entirely, but also I kind of get it. Like, when you've been doing nothing but chasing academic success and actually achieving that academic success, it'll always feel like it's never enough. Any of my fellow scholars out there feel the same way? I know you guys do. Okay, something tells me Robert seldom heard the words, "I'm proud of you." That I can relate to, but like I said, not to get too deep. So Robert felt like something was missing in his career and in his life overall. And in 1932, Robert's career took a bit of a radical turn. A turn towards resuscitation, as in the idea that the dead could be brought back to life. Robert didn't invent the idea of resuscitation. Duh. I mean, besides biblical scripture, in the early 1900s, scientists had been toying with the idea for some time now. The thing about Robert was that his approach was systematic and grounded in pure biological principles. Robert hypothesized that with the right combination of mechanical motion and chemical intervention, life could be restored to the recently deceased. Robert saw his thinking of resuscitation as a seesaw-like device that he coined a teeter board. It's a cute name, teeter. This doohickey of his was designed to induce artificial circulation in a recently deceased body. The movement of the teeter board would simulate the pumping action of the heart, encouraging the flow of blood. Along with this mechanical motion, Robert administered a mixture of epinephrine and anticoagulants, fancy words meaning adrenaline, all in an effort to jumpstart the body's vital functions. Remember, he was a biologist, so he was looking at everything from a very scientific and practical lens. Like any experiment, the first trials weren't exactly the most successful, and in his initial trials, which began in 1933, involved attempts to revive victims of heart attack, drowning, and electrocution. Sadly, these victims did remain dead. But that didn't deter Robert, no sir. As a true Capricorn, he refused to give up. Although these first trials were all unsuccessful, Robert remained undeterred. The lack of results did not dissuade him. No. Instead, these trials served as a catalyst for refining his technique. Realizing that human testing was not yet feasible per se, which surprising because this was the early 1900s, so you'd think things would be more flexible. But yes, human testing was not acceptable. So Robert turned his focus to animal experiments in an attempt to perfect his resuscitation methods. Earlier, I did mention that the idea/act of resuscitation was not new, even in the early 1900s, because, for example, we have scripture word of it, and Robert knew this. Of course he did. Like, honestly, I imagine him as like a little Sheldon. Do you remember? Do you guys know the show The Big Bang Theory? I absolutely love that show. I used to have a friend who absolutely hated that show because he is a smart cookie, and he would get so mad because he would say that show is kind of like offensive to actual smart people. I'm like, I'm sorry, like I think it's a good show. If you guys like that show, let me know. But anyways, I see Robert as like a little Sheldon. In 1934, Robert began his most famous experiments when he set his mind to revive clinically dead dogs. Like I said, he was pretty well versed in pretty much anything, so he was familiar with the scripture word of Lazarus, the biblical character known for being revived from the dead by Jesus Christ himself. So he had a total of 20 fox terriers as his subjects. And we are going to focus a little more on Lazarus 4 and 5, because he named all of his subjects Lazarus 1 through 20. So 4 and 5 were the most successful, quote unquote, and I say successful because we're about to see why. All right, so these experiments were marked a high point in Robert's career where he actually achieved partial success, believe it or not. He achieved to take breathing life back into his test animals. Lazarus 4 was intentionally put to death under controlled conditions of asphyxiation with ether and nitrogen on May 22nd, 1934. R.I.P. Lazarus IV. His heart stopped beating and he stopped breathing. After 6 minutes passed from his last breath, Robert decided it was time to go in. Robert put Lazarus IV on his teeterboard and then opened one of the terrier's thigh veins to inject a saline solution saturated with oxygen and containing the heart stimulant adrenaline, liver extract, and canine blood. Robert then gave the terrier a version of CPR by breathing into the dog's mouth while his assistant rubbed his belly and teetered the teeterboard like a seesaw. I know it's so sad, but it's kind of cute to think about. Maybe I'm just messed up. The stimulant solution sank in a glass gate as it seeped into the corpse through 5 feet of rubber tubing. Before they knew it, Lazarus IV gasped, his leg twitched, and his heart began to beat. After a carefully timed series of injections and the rhythmic motion of the teeterboard, the dog was successfully brought back to life. To be fair, the poor dog was far from fully restored back to his original state. Poor Lazarus IV rose from the dead blind and unable to stand without assistance. He was able to perform basic actions such as crawling, barking, and even consuming his food. For 8 hours and 13 minutes, Lazarus IV lay in a coma, whining, panting, and barking. Robert got impatient and decided to inject a glucose solution which caused a blood clot to form, and Lazarus IV died once again, this time for good. Despite the difficulties, the results were encouraging to Robert nonetheless. Robert knew that although the results weren't conclusive evidence, he had kind of cracked the code to resurrection. That was Lazarus IV. Now, as for Lazarus V, he showed even more promising results. Lazarus V was also intentionally put to death under controlled conditions, but this time, Robert reported that he revived the animal and exhibited fewer impairments and returned to a state closer to normalcy much faster than Lazarus IV. According to results, Lazarus V had been dead for 30 minutes before Robert intervened using his combination of artificial respiration and chemical injections to restore the dog's lively functions. Within 4 days, Lazarus V had shown greater improvement than Lazarus IV had managed in 13 days. Needless to say, this success gave Robert the ego boost he so needed. Although the experiments weren't 100% successful in the lab, they were hailed as a great success by the public and the press. Robert and his experiments were introduced to the public through a 1935 film about him and his experiments called Life Returns. The film was quite an interesting watch, according to many. I myself wouldn't watch it, but I read a bit on it, so I'll give you a quick synopsis. For starters, the film starts with the on-screen statement. Quote, "To whom it may concern. The actual experiment of bringing the dead back to life, which is part of the motion picture Life Returns, was performed by myself and staff on May 22nd, 1934 at 11:45 p.m. in Berkeley, California. This part of the picture was originally taken to retain permanent scientific record of our experiment. Everything shown is absolutely real. The animal was unquestionably and actually dead and was brought back to life. May I offer my thanks to my assistant, Mario Margutti, William Black, Ralph Selmer, and Roderick Critter, who are shown carrying out the respective parts. Respectfully submitted, Dr. Robert E. Cornish." Essentially, the movie is this weird combination of a boy, his dog, and his father as they struggle to make ends meet. The boy's dog gets captured by the town's dog catcher and is gassed to death. The miserable boy, devastated by his dog's death, manages to convince his dad and Dr. Robert Cornish to try and revive his dog. This is where it gets a little weirder, more so than, because the last part of the movie, according to Robert Cornish, is actual footage of him and his team working to revive the animal, which they succeed in doing, which, of course, to the press and the public is a huge deal because essentially they're watching resuscitation live action. Not only was his ego stroked, as you could imagine, but it further fueled his belief that his method of artificial respiration could one day be applied to human beings. Now, Potential and an ego boost is one thing. Feasibility and the legal system is another. With his success on animals, Robert turned his sights toward the possibility of human experimentation. However, his ambitions soon collided with legal and ethical boundaries. Surprise, surprise. Let's take one or two step backs because yes, legal and ethical boundaries did collide, but let's talk about how it got there. In May 1935, Robert received a letter from a Thomas McMonigal, a death row inmate at San Quentin State Prison. Thomas was sentenced to death for murdering a child and had spent a number of years on death row, and his execution by gas chamber date was rapidly coming up. Thomas had become aware of Robert's work and offered his own body for post-execution resuscitation. He wanted to go straight from the gas chamber to Robert's teeter. So, get this, okay? Thomas believed that if Robert succeeded in bringing him back to life after his execution, he would be able to avoid a second execution due to U.S.'s double jeopardy law, which prevents an individual from being tried twice for the same crime. Smart cookie. I hate to say this, but smart cookie. I mean, let's be honest, he's got nothing to lose. Okay, so Robert jumped at this opportunity, and honestly, I don't blame him, not one bit. And you'd be lying if you said you wouldn't either. Now, personally, I'm 100% against the death penalty. I strongly believe that no one has the right to take anyone's life. That is only God's job. But putting myself in Robert's position, I get it. So in 1947, Robert petitioned the state of California for permission to carry out the experiment following Thomas's execution. He sent a proposal written in third person that read, Dr. Cornish, elated at the sensational success of his experiments with dogs, wants to make the attempt on humans. He is now seeking permission to experiment with a criminal executed by poisonous gas. Given the body after physicians declare the man dead, he would strap the body to a teeter board and attach electrical heating pads to the limbs. Next, a chemical known as methylene blue would be injected into the veins to neutralize the poisonous fumes that had caused death. Pure oxygen would then be pumped into the lungs through a mask, and the teeter board rocked slowly to keep the blood in circulation. Dr. Cornish believes firmly that the dead man would live. He does not agree with other scientists that the brain of the man so revived would be hopelessly damaged. Sadly, but not surprising, the state of California kindly denied his request. For obvious reasons, legal authorities were uncomfortable with the potential legal ramifications of realiving a convicted murderer. Let's be honest. Let's be quite obviously honest here. Did Robert not think this through? Not to mention the ethical concerns regarding the manipulation of life and death were central to the decision-making process. Thomas was executed in 1948 without further controversy, and Robert's hopes and dreams for a human trial went down with him. Honestly, I kind of do think Robert was onto something with his Terrier Lazarus 1 through 20 experiments. I'm not sure just how far those experiments may have taken him, but I do see the vision, right? Despite Robert's semi-success with the Lazarus canines, his career began to swiftly go downward after the constant rejections towards human trials. He continued his work but found it increasingly difficult to secure funding or support from the broader scientific community, many of who viewed his work as either unethical, it was, or scientifically unviable. It was. By the 1950s, Robert had retired from resuscitation research altogether. In his late career, Robert turned his focus to a more commercial route. In his later years, he produced, quote, Dr. Cornish's tooth powder with vitamin D and fluoride. You heard that right. He went from resuscitating, from taking the dead, having them alive, to selling tooth powder with vitamin D and fluoride. That's quite the pivot. Okay, bring dogs back from the dead to inventing toothpaste that works vitamin D into your gums. Quite ambitious and controversial of him. His pivot into dental hygiene products was far removed from the ambitious and controversial scientific work that had defined his earlier career. That was really it for him until his death in 1963. Well, my curious cats, thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. A little bit different than most of what we've covered, but certainly interesting. Tragic, but interesting. Thank you a million for still being here, and hopefully I can get back to regular scheduled programming. If you enjoyed today's episode, please remember to like, subscribe, and follow on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Instagram. As always, citations will be in the description if you want to check those out. Stay blessed, stay sane, and stay psyched. I love you. Bye.